John Lovell, founder of the Warrior Poet Society, sits down with the USCCA to discuss the rise of unrest and why vigilance needs to be a priority for all Americans. Learn what you can do right now to make yourself safer and be a better protector even in the face of anger. Because anyone could find themselves confronted by danger, but freedom requires courage over fear. At the USCCA, we're taking Safer at Home to the next level with our $20,000 Ultimate Home Defense Makeover. Join now and you could win a full home preparedness audit with expert Jason Speller. This prize package also includes a security system, emergency supplies, training, and more.
Hi, I'm Steve Fischer, the USCCA's Training Operations Manager. Today, we are going to talk about one of the most important topics and most common topics that we're getting asked about. Safety during demonstrations and protests and even riots. What should people be doing? Now, joining me today is John Lovell of the Warrior Poet Society. John, I am so happy that you're with us today. What do you got to say about all this?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Steve. I mean, this is pretty upsetting stuff. Seems like a powder keg just went off, and I'm not really sure what precipitated it all. I mean, the death of George Floyd was an absolute horrific, upsetting tragedy, and people should be angry about it. But then when I see just how angry people are and how they're, even worse, how they're dealing with their anger, of like desecrating monuments and burning cop cars and stealing from businesses and setting Target on fire. I'm like,
my daughter lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right where a lot of the demonstrations are occurring. She actually has participated in, as recently as yesterday, in one of the marches and demonstrations, and she's been working with neighborhood groups that are cleaning up the messes that all of the instigators and the agitators and the bad people are creating, once the sun goes down. I know that you have a good friend of yours in Atlanta who was in a situation where somebody was about to throw a rock at his vehicle.
Yeah, it's one of my, it is my business partner at Warrior Poet Society, Evan, and he was just downtown riding with his girlfriend. This is right around the outskirts of Atlanta, and he saw somebody, just kind of like demeanor hit, saw his vehicle and was searching around for a rock, and Evan had the window rolled down. He's like, "Don't do it, man. Don't do it." And he finds a rock, and then Evan peels out because this guy just saw a nice car and said, "I'm going to throw a rock at that because I'm mad about, just what is that, bro? What is that?" Everywhere I go, it's like the world is on fire all of a sudden. And I get people are mad, but just because you're mad about something doesn't give you carte blanche to unheap unlimited rage in whatever area you want. It's called adulting, right? I mean,
Yeah, people just need to be smarter about things. I mean, the heart can often cause us to act irrationally because we get those emotions involved in what's going on at that particular point in time. But if we can control those emotions and use our thought process and understand what the objective is, which is to create a change something that's broken, something that's not working, that's causing all of this anger and this pain, right? So demonstrate, go ahead and demonstrate, protest even, but don't start fires. Don't break into businesses, in your neighborhoods. I mean, are the people that are doing this, are they even from those neighborhoods, John?
No, I mean, first off, I don't know. And every single place is going to be different. You got to look at the data, and what's true for this area may not be true for this area. What do you think is adding into the just fury cocktail that's bringing all this about?
Well, you know how easy it is to stir people up. I mean, when I was a kid, and I know this is a long time ago, so leave me alone here, but when I was a kid, I still remember those days. You know what I was? I was one of those agitators and instigators. I went to a small Catholic grade school, and I was that one out of that class that would, encourage people to misbehave. Not in a bad, violent way like what we're seeing today, but nonetheless, I was still that instigator. I would get enjoyment out of watching other people get into trouble for some reason. Since then, fortunately, I've grown into a good Christian man, and I don't make those stupid choices anymore, and I do find myself when I'm in a position to help, I do a good job of helping, and that's what we need. We need more people that are involved in these demonstrations to look around them and see the people that are causing the problems and point those out to law enforcement officers and start a relationship, a cooperative relationship with law enforcement. And law enforcement needs to trust the people that are doing these demonstrations so that they're not on the edge themselves. And when a fight starts, if you and I are going to go toe to toe, it escalates. If somebody starts it and the other one pushes back, and the next thing you know it, we're going down to the ground, right? So that's the same thing that happens in the middle of all these people too. We talk about avoiding these situations. Situational awareness, John, you teach this. You were up here last year, and I was fortunate enough to watch you work with your students, and you did such a great job of talking to them about being situationally aware and how to avoid conflict. I still remember we had the guys running around with the training, pistols, and how quickly things can get out of hand. Why don't you talk to our audience about that? We're looking at large groups of people. How are we situational aware? What are we looking for? How do we identify potential troublemakers, those types of things, and how do we avoid them? Let's start there, John.
Sure. Yeah, situational awareness is key. If you don't see the fight coming, and bad guys and cowards typically ambush. I was thinking about this yesterday. Every single day when I get off work or even, during work, I drive through my downtown area and there's a bunch of protesters. Every single day, there's even more of them. They've got their signs. So when I got in that crowd, I wouldn't be able to maintain reactionary gap and situational awareness before somebody took a run at me. And I'd have to be scanning at all moments. And so I think about how could I even be around some of these protesters and maintain situational awareness? And the answer is you can't. You can't. And
My dad taught me to avoid conflict by avoiding confrontation, so you just stay away from it. Now, at the beginning of this video, I talked to you about how old I am. And I can go back to the 60s. I remember this because I was a young man, a young boy. And I remember my parents and their brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, and our neighborhood friends, when they had to go to work during the riots in the 60s, how they would talk about the routes that they were going to take. They heard that there was going to be a march. They heard that there was going to be a demonstration. So in order to not find themselves in a bad situation, they took a different route. They took an alternate route, and they were smart about it. They were aware of the situation, and instead of getting into it, they avoided it. So, the whole situational awareness, conflict avoidance thing, understanding what pre-threat indicators are too, that's another topic to talk about too. So when you can't avoid it, when you find yourself in the middle of this, you better be able to de-escalate, right?
Yeah, and when we're dealing with a crowd, there is no de-escalation because the crowd, I think, becomes its own snowballing echo chamber of irrationality and rage, and they're playing off each other, getting more and more excited. And so if you were able to step in as somebody had an antithetical argument, there's no way to de-escalate that. And everything I see is a threat indicator in those crowds. And so, man, just if you want to be safe, you can't really deal with these people. A lot of what I see is severely psychologically unbalanced, unhealthy people. And I don't have to try hard to win that argument. When you see the burning of cars and the killing of people and beating people down of different opposition, and it's the Antifa rioters. There's peaceful protest, which I support, and I'm like, party on. If you want to do that, that's great. And so protesters on one hand, and then the crazy Antifa rioters on the other. I do want to distinguish between the two of those, but on the rioting side, these people who are just angry, furious, shouting versus a peaceful protest, all the people on this other side, that is all the threat indicator you need. Don't get near that person. I think it was the great Cooper, who's kind of like a predecessor to all of us, even though you have been around since early 20s, long time. So, by the way, he said, avoid stupid people and stupid places at stupid times. And I'm like, man, that's just great advice to live by. I'm sorry about the old man joke. Steve, we're buddies. And so every time, man, I need a little bit of credit here because I passed over like 12 old man jokes so far since we started recording, like 12 of them. So far, they were so loud in my head, I could barely even listen to you. I'm like, nope, don't do that. Be professional, John. And I could. So one slipped out. So you're super old.
I embrace my wise old self. That's all I can say to that, John. Bring it on, man. I can take it.
There's the spin. There's the spin.
Yeah.
No, you are wise.
Talk
You
about
are
old.
wise.
Talk about old. So here's another story. So we're talking about demonstrations and protests and how they can quickly get out of hand. So my lovely wife Peggy, she was. And we're going to go back to 1990. Actually, March 31st of 1990. She and some of her girlfriends, they were in England. They were actually in London, and they were touring England. They had lunch that afternoon. It was a wonderful day, and a spring day, and they had lunch, and they were leaving Kennington Park, and they were heading to Trafalgar Square. So all this history that's over there, right? Well, if anybody understands history, now we're going back 30 years, right? So you got to be kind of in my age group to appreciate this story, but even the young people can get what I'm about to help them learn about what to do in the middle of demonstrations, protests, and riots. Well, so my wife and her friends were out there, and they get to Trafalgar Square, and suddenly this mob, and I'm not talking about a small mob. If you look at history, they counted over 200,000 people ascended on Trafalgar Square, and what they were protesting was the poll taxes that were up in that time, and people were mad. And cell phones were out at that point in time. My wife grabbed her cell phone. I think it was maybe a flip or one of those bigger things, but she called me up. It was like 8 a.m. In the morning by me, and I answered the phone, and she's just frantic. She's like, "Oh my God, honey, I'm in the middle of this riot." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." I'm thinking she's joking, but then you could hear all the stuff that's going on, and she's like, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, you're calling me here. I'm in West Bend, Wisconsin. You're in London, England. What do you want me to do?" So I saw how panicked she was, and I just took an opportunity to say, "Okay, let's look for daylight. Let's look for a place that you can go. How far out in front can you see? How do you get out of the middle of this craziness?" You know, there were people that were, she described them as pierced up, and they took their clothes off, and they were fighting anybody that would come close to them. And then the police came in on horseback and were running those people over, and it was just pure chaos, and she was terrified. So, how do you escape? How do you evade in those types of situations, John?
Yeah, good question. I mean, get out of there, especially when there's a protest. I think you can rally, a peaceful protest, but if the spirit of that crowd goes crazy and you start seeing the writing on the wall of like, this isn't calm protest, this isn't embracing our democratic processes. This isn't long live the republic. This is a riot. It's angry and furious. I'm thinking right now about the recent protest that the gun community had in Virginia, where there was a bunch of terrible unconstitutional laws that were about to be placed, and the low estimates have about 20,000 gun owners fell on Virginia, up to about 80,000. And what we found during those protests, though everyone was armed, everyone was really polite, all the streets were left clean, and that never happens with the protest. I mean, it's just a wasteland of trash and vandalism. And here in Virginia, there wasn't any vandalism. All the trash was picked up. They were engaging in conversations with the cops in a respectful manner, and the cops were even validating a lot of their, problems. And though, almost everyone was armed, there was no shootings. There was no violence. It was a peaceful protest. And I'm like, man, that's how you become heard. That's how you make a change. That's something that's in the spirit of the world changers, Martin Luther King Jr., who engaged in peaceful protest and was able to bring about something amazing. Same with Gandhi as well. It's the peaceful protest, right? And it's this rioting that makes it far worse. And that it's against the spirit of those great reformers that taught us how to do peaceful protests, right? And so I think, all of this just bodes very poorly, to say the least.
Yeah, I wish we had another Martin Luther King Jr. right now, because we desperately need him. We find ourselves in these situations. So, the last straw, the last thing that we can do is if we're in the middle of something and maybe bricks are falling around us or fires are starting around us, and somebody pushes you down, kicks you, that type of thing, we have to fight. That's your reason to fight. But your fight is only to get away, right? To
Right.
fight enough to get out of there. And I know that in these situations, a lot of people that don't train to fight, they panic, they freeze, and then they make poor decisions. Can you help us through that worst case scenario, John, somebody finds themselves in that spot and somebody does attack them and they're in the middle of these protest demonstrations and riots, and now people are physically and violently attacking them. How do you coach them up?
I taught jiu-jitsu for a little while, not as like a high up sensei kind of thing, but just it's something that I did. And every once in a while, somebody would come by and say, "Hey, John, how do you get out of this?" And they'd show some weird pretzel kind of hold, or like it's a full Nelson with legs hooked in, and then a buddy who had a knife to your throat. And I'm like, "You don't get in it in the first place, bro." Kind of like, right. So right then when you asked me that, I pictured like somebody in a fetal position, surrounded by 12 people, hitting and punching them. And it's kind of like, you make sure your prayer game's on point. There's nothing you can do. You hope the crowd gets tired and you curl into a fetus and protect your major parts. Kind of like, if it's that, the answer is you weren't situationally aware enough. You made poor decisions in being there in the first place. You didn't book it when you could, and you didn't read pre-threat indicators. And it's kind of like, man, you can't get out of that. But if you start seeing a crowd turn angry, you need to run for your life, kind of thing. So if you start feeling that happen and somebody puts hands on you, this is a good time where you can try to de-escalate, strike, block, and just sprint the other way. Is probably your best option there to get out of it. I'm not some SME on this subject, so I want to be careful not to overstep my my areas of expertise, but that has the ring of good wisdom consistent with what I see real world when I look at the difference between a protest and an angry riot.
Yeah. What can you do? Like I said, I love the way you went back to the beginning, which said, don't put yourself in a situation. You don't have to fight. But if you find yourself there, you also gave great advice. Protect your head so you can continue to think. You get hit in the head, what does that do to your ability to think? Where are your vulnerable points? Make sure that you can put your shields up in front and stop those people from hitting directly, those types of things. Yep. Keep the blood flow to the brain, keep the brain working, keep the heart working, those vital areas and organs when people are out there punching, kicking, and hitting and throwing bricks at you, do your best and then get the heck out of there. So that being said, now what, John? So this is a good time for everybody that's watching this discussion right now to learn from you, and I want you to give them some advice. So we want to talk about not letting anger master you. We want to talk about looking for justice, working with the police. Don't sacrifice it by getting caught up in it and doing something foolishly unlawful. We all know how important it is to maintain the thought that freedom dies in fear. If we're afraid of what's going on, we're losing our freedom, right? So there's hope, there's communication and olive branches that we can add out there. And as a warrior poet, all your followers and all your future followers, John, how are you going to advise them right now? We know that you and your loyal followers they're protectors of people. They're sheepdogs. We know that. So why don't you talk to them a little bit more about that responsibility, and then kind of lead into why you're partnered up with the USCCA.
So I love what you said. Freedom dies in fear. I mean, that's a repulsive thought of, we're warrior poets. We're the freedom fighter guys. It's like we have hearts that are motivated with love for people. Our hands are skilled so that we would be able to be efficient protectors, and our eyes are wide open, ready to be calculating and thinking, recognizing we're the weapon. Guns and knives and stuff, and even hand to hand, that's a tool where you are the weapon. So fully on board, head, heart, hands, ready to protect. But you're right, freedom does die in fear. And so if we let fear master us, we're in a whole lot of hurt. I think it was, help me out, it was Benjamin Franklin who said those who would, and I'm paraphrasing here, but those who would trade freedom for security deserve neither one of them. Mm-hmm. And so really our society, I was thinking about this morning, over coffee, making my breakfast, that I think our republic is based on a populace that's educated, that is God-fearing, that is value-centric, I think it was Dennis Prager or something put out by PragerU that I also read this morning that said the thing that distinguishes an American from almost every country and culture on earth is that we're a values-based. We're not race-based. We're not class-based. We're none of that, which makes most of the world around us. We're values-based. We hold these truths to be inevitable or inalienable, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. I realize I just paraphrased the Constitution because I couldn't decide whether to actually go into the full quote or just paraphrase it. So there you go. But life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, those are the truths that we hold to be natural rights. And that's a big deal. And so it's our Declaration of Independence. It's our Constitution that really sets us apart. We're a values-based country, right? And so I think that requires an audacious, an educated, a bold, a caring type of populace. And we have really, as we've thrown away our traditional centering on values, on family, on one nation under God, what's happened is we've lost that our character, so to speak, which allows when something makes you angry, you don't have any backstop. You don't have any controls that would say, this is right, this is wrong. And so I'll operate in my anger within these parameters of goodness, right? And so there's a verse in the book of Ephesians. That's in the Bible. If you don't like Bible or something, it's irrelevant because the wisdom is good, whether you like Bible or not. And it says, be angry and do not sin. And so the idea is it's right to be angry, but it's wrong to go on a murderous rampage because you're angry, right? And so we have to be able to calmly, coolly look at something. If somebody makes you angry, they control you now. I tell that to my little kids. I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. And when the 8-year-old makes the 6-year-old mad and he gets real angry, I'm like, now he's controlling you. How do you like knowing that you are being controlled by him? You know, and I think a lot of people weren't raised with that idea of like, no, calm, cool.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, John. Those are such powerful points. Your children are a lot younger than mine. I have a 35-year-old, a 32-year-old, and a 28-year-old, but I raised them the same way that you did. And, you know, they're family. So family, they're going to fight. You know, brothers and sisters fight. And we're all brothers and sisters, regardless of skin color. It doesn't matter what part of the world that we came from. But right now, we live in America, the greatest country in the history of the world, you know, and we're free, the one country in the world that's truly free. We need to learn how to get along with each other. We fight, but we better hug, kiss, and make up when we're done with that fight and go for the common good, the common cause. Now, your warrior poets, they're your family. They're your extended family. USCCA, all of the members of the USCCA are extended family, and we're very diverse groups. Hopefully we become even more diverse so that we can unify and work together. Your organization, Warrior Poets, and USCCA members, we should be like this. You know, we have a common cause. We should be mutually supportive and moving towards good. And John, I love learning from you. All I can say is that the last summer I got an opportunity to spend time with you and learn from you. You got it right up here. You got it right down here, man.
You too, man. You too. Thank you.
You've been there, done that. And as an old man talking to a young man, I can't wait for the next time that we get together so that I can learn some more from you. And I am so happy and honored that you were able to spend some time with me today and with our viewers, our audience. And this partnership, I hope it just continues to grow. And I think you agree with me that USCCA and Warrior Poets like this, right?
I was pretty slow checking you guys out from afar for quite a while, making sure you're safe. Do you really have the little guy in mind? Are you going to sell out later? Or are you going to, and really, true to word, USCCA has similar values and ethos. And over time, because I checked you out for quite a while, I'm like, nope, I think they're good to go. And I've been easing in the waters of doing more and more. And I'm like, man, you guys are now a big company with a small feel in terms of values and every man. So I'm like, man, more and more with you guys. I am thrilled to partner with you guys. And y'all are helping also in the areas of the legal areas, which, man, we really need to be engaged in the culture war. That's what we're doing right now. Also in the political realm. And then court cases being one, which is a big advocacy, gun advocacy thing, and freedom protection that you guys are engaging in. That I can't do as an individual as well. And so these partnerships become ever so important, and I recognize that. So I think the legal protections y'all offer, the gun advocacy stuff y'all do specifically in the courts, we can be better together. So I am happy to partner with you guys.
Yeah, and I'm happy you're partnering with us. So I think this is a good place to wrap it up, John. Here you go, man. Virtual bro hug. Here you go.
Right here. Come to.
Did you get me? Remember
So
that
dumb.
one for the kids? So
dumb.
Clutching your head. All right, my friend. Again, thanks for being here with us. I can't wait to see you this summer. God bless you, man, and your family and all your followers. Till next time.
See you, man.
At the USCCA, we're taking safer at home to the next level with our $20,000 Ultimate Home Defense Makeover. Join now and you could win a full home preparedness audit with expert Jason Speller. This prize package also includes a security system, emergency supplies, training, and more.